Hi everyone, thanks for coming. I think it's time. And I'm Frank. If you don't know who am I, you just ask, when you ask the question, who is Frank, you already know my name. I'm Frank Hu. So I currently work as a, that's how I pronounce my last name. Easier for everyone to remember. I work at Optimizely for distributed system team. But today, I will rarely touch anything about distributed system. I want to share a little bit about how I test my service with Apache Airflow. Just before the talk, I want to do a quick survey. How many people really like write tests? Raise your hand. Okay, a little bit, a quarter less. Okay, cool. No one really like tests, but we need to rely on tests, right? So shipping the quality software is hard for many reasons. As an engineer, I'm not a QA, I'm an engineer. I just try to go through as much tests as I could and ship the best code as I could. And using the test pyramid framework, including unit tests, integration tests, end-to-end tests, hopefully it can catch my back before I ship to production. But still found it's not that easy, as we still need it to ensure our software is always work at launch as well as during lifetime. So in my imagination, when you have a test, it should look like this. Very straightforward, cover all aspects in your code, and it just work. But probably in real life, it'll be something like this. So I know people write all kinds of tests. I just make sure my tests work for my case and not worry about any code structure for it. And not even think about, okay, ideally, my tests should be very organized, easily reused, and easily extensible, cover all the case. In reality, it's not that case. So I try to come up with a few reasons why writing tests is pretty hard. First, I think it's really about the complexity of your system. I use the term service because I don't mind how many components you could have in your service. And even you have like one web app server, one database, and potentially now, for today, for more feature you are adding, you have to add in more and more components. How can you ensure that your test still works? And especially for end-to-end tests, how can you still ensure that you are covered the newest end instead of the previous one? And some reason is like a service can be developed by many other teams. Let's say I need to set up a certain environment that not only contributed by my team. I need to talk with someone in a larger organization probably means that talk to the manager first, set up meeting, set up email, do a bunch of stuff, and then set it down. So try to think, is there any way that we can organize our test in a with high reusability and it's easy to extend while our service grows? Okay, then you may ask question, why Airflow? Because everyone pretty much know Airflow is pretty good for work for ETL data pipeline jobs. We use Airflow in Optimizely as well. But in case anyone don't know Airflow, I want to do a little bit of intro about Airflow, especially the three key concepts here. So Airflow is a platform that is enable you to order, schedule, and monitor workflow programmatically. The first concept I want to raise here is about DAG. So basically, DAG is the workflow that you want to write. If you can see the graph here, basically the structure of the workflow, that's how we define it as a DAG. A common mistake here when you first see the DAG, maybe you think that's how the data flows. It's not. So there will be very limited data flow from one task to another. Basically, you just arrange a bunch of different tasks like this. You don't have to require data to stream like this. And another thing I really like about Airflow is like the definition of DAG is written in Python. It's not XML or JSON diagram that you construct and keep it somewhere very hard to code review. Everything is written in Python. It's very easy to understand, very easy to config. The second concept will be operator. So what does operator mean? Actually, each of the tasks, like the small rectangle you see here, is a small operator. The operator determines what is actually gets done. We'll come back later, but the really thing I want to raise about the operator is Airflow is initialized by Airbnb and incubate Apache. So now it has a very support runtime. Basically, you can run Python on it, you can run your container on it, you can run MySQL, and even for my job, I schedule a lot of like map reduce job on it. So when using Airflow, basically, you don't need to think about what's the dependency that you want. You can just ship whatever, you select the suitable operator, and you should run. The last concept will be task. The task basically like you initialize a parameter, you initialize the operator with the design parameter you have, then it'll become a task. So everything you see here is a task, but underneath there will be an operator backend. Okay, that's a lot about Apache Airflow. Everyone is pretty know about it. So how should we really write a test? Here I want to give a very simple scenario. I hope this try to come up with as generic scenario as enough so everyone can easily adopt to whatever service that you develop. Let's say we try to test a counting service. Basically, it exposes an API, right? It have like two API. One is like post, means that I keep sending events. The events can contain whatever payload you have. And the service so far, let's treat it as a black box now. I assuming it done some like aggregation in it, store in database maybe, and then it exposes a get results. The get function is to get the results. The get function is pretty count the number of events I have received. Of course, you can say, hey, I can add a few filters in the rest of the API, that's fine. I just want to come up with something as generic as enough. Okay, so we have the test, and I want to test it on Apache Airflow. The first question raised in my mind is like, what's the migration cost? I definitely already have a test running system. Why do I have to use Airflow? Because the suggestion is that is like, as a service, we already built it. I bet, even though you don't have any tests there, I bet you somehow have some running script or running step here can already facilitate to verify the service actually work. So given that and let it run on Apache Airflow, the migration cost is almost zero. Why do I say that? Let's say you already have a test like this. Basically, try to test the API service that we have. I just select a random number of counts, means like number of events I try to send. And for each test, I send events. I wait for a while, and I check whether I get the correct number of events I set. Very, very easy, right? Straightforward. Okay, how should I let it run on Apache Airflow? The first thing, you have to define a DAG. This is very easy. You basically don't define anything here. First thing is just like a default arguments that you have a lot of parameters that you can set first. I just set owner and set the start day, which is today, and I give it a name, just like PyBay modulus task, and I pass it. So this we have already created a DAG object, which don't do anything yet. Next, we are going to create the operator. The operator, since the previous task, the job running is written in Python, so I will select a Python operator. I'll pass in a task ID, hey, test API. I'll specify the function that I want to call, like say test API. And the function take one argument, which is the endpoint of the API. I'll just give it as one parameter. And I specify, okay, this operator belongs to the DAG that we defined before. Okay, I already have a task. I already have the DAG. Let's make it running. Let's assuming we have like already have 3 tasks, which is setup, test the API, and cleanup. The setup and cleanup is the pretty generic one setup, and basically you try to form the dependency and the running sequence here. So I like the syntax of Airflow. Basically, you use a bit shift here, pointer setup to test API to cleanup, and then the one will be the one that you will see on Airflow UI. So basically, you can connect 3 tasks, just run as it is. Okay, very easy. Within less than 20 lines of code, I already migrate whatever task I already have, and I let it run on Airflow. That's something that you can easily do. But what's the problem about that? It's like, okay, Frank, I don't only have like one test, right? I can have many tests. So it's not a problem in Airflow. Basically, previously we schedule the setup and schedule the test API as the children of setup and set up a cleanup. Now I can let all tests run in parallel. The thing I want to highlight here is like you don't need to consider about parallelism when you write the test. Of course you can do that in code, but no one prefers to do that, like running multi-process, multi-thread test. Basically, the parallelism is already bring by how many Airflow workers that you config. So by running like this, all the 5 tasks, I executed parallelly, so you already gain some speed benefits. One interesting thing I want to do a little bit of intro about Airflow is like in each task, you can specify the trigger rule for that task. If we go back to the previous slides, you suppose the cleanup should be run when all 5 tasks finish. But that's not the only configuration we can have. You can have configuration like all success, all failure, all done, 1 failure, 1 success. Basically, I imagine it can construct whatever condition you want to have. Okay, great. So this is basically the test we run. And I want to go a little deeper. I want to add another test. Because now we only test like 2 ends of the API. Let's assume in the accounting service, I have a database as well. I may want to add a test to check the database is working as expected. How will you do that? Of course, the traditional way is like, hey, you already defined all the tests. I will look at all of them, adding my little check there, just let it run. Of course, it works. But I think in Airflow, there was a different way to do it. It's like, actually, you can break down those tasks. If you can still recall the sample test I write, you send the request, you wait for a while, you get the request. Basically, send, wait, and get is the 3 modules that you really need. And I don't want to repeat the module again in all the tasks that I run. So those like logically duplicated test case can be abstract within that operator. What does it really mean? So basically, I can create a task factory, right? And I just run a for loop to create different tasks out of the task factory just by passing the parameter like endpoint, payload, number of counts, and what DAG it belongs to. Then we don't need write 10 operator like this. We only need like 2 task factory. One is for post events, one is for get edit events. It really abstract the logic that you have here. And now if you say, hey, what if I want to add a DB test there? Just create another factory and insert them in between. Then everything's done. So in this way, you break a little bit, but you can see it can be easily extended. And then you may raise the question, hey, Frank, you mentioned that we are not supposed to pass data between tasks. But you are now trying to break in tasks. And in the send events, I send a number of events. How should I let the downstream task know how many events are already sent? So in Apache Airflow, even though you cannot like pass large amount of data downstream, you are still able to use the XCOM. Basically, it's a task level storage that you can post any information from upstream, and then you pull it from downstream. So in the 2 tasks we see here, after I post the events, I can say, hey, I sent 5 events, and in the later task, I just verify, okay, I does receive 5 events to do that. Another thing is like, you will notice maybe during the verification, you want to have a little retry, or you want to have a little timeout. Of course, you can implement that in your code. You use a while, like wait, sleep for 10 seconds, wake up, check. If you fail, sleep another 10 seconds. That logic is also abstract with a sensor operator. Basically, the later verification step, you can use a sensor operator to do that. And just like wake up in certain period, check whether it works or not, and you can stack the max retry for like 3 times. So if it didn't work 3 times, just mark it as a fail. Good. So it still looks not that difficult. I already have everything. This is DAG. And I already have the test. But now I want to run the test in a broader perspective. What do I mean by broader perspective? I want to test in production. Maybe I want to run in the environment of staging. I want to run in the environment of dev as well. So how should I do that? If you are the person don't mind copy and paste, you can copy all of them, just paste on 3 places, it will work. But a more ideal way is like in Airflow, we have an idea of sub-DAG here. Since all the 3 DAG are basically executing the same logic, the only difference will be the environment. So we can wrap the whole DAG we have already developed and wrap it into a sub-DAG. And then you can have an environment chooser to trigger which DAG that you want to run. So the code can look much clean. You don't need to copy all of them. I want to dive a little bit about the definition of sub-DAG. probably it's very similar to what you have seen when you define a DAG. The only difference there is like the name of the subDAG or the ID of subDAG need to be in the format of parent DAG stack ID my current name. So somehow form a linkage there to tell you, okay, this is my parent DAG and I'm the subDAG of it. Okay, if you recall, we have 3 environments, but definitely my test will not run 3 environments in parallel. Why we want to have a test running in staging, dev, and production at the same time? It seems pretty dangerous, and it's way waste of resources as well. So that's why I developed an env chooser operator, which is basically a branching operator here. Branch operator means that you can determine specific downstream tasks you're going to run. You don't need to run them in parallel all the same. You only need to trigger one. So I use the branch Python operator here. I give it the task ask ID. I told it how you should choose your environment. And let's take a look at the Python code I have. Basically, the environment will read the environment from a configuration. Of course, if the configuration is null, I default that to prod. I'll explain the reason why I default that to prod. But basically, okay, I will check the configuration. If you specify the configuration, I will choose from prod, dev, and staging and to run. If you don't know choose it, I'll just run prod. Okay, you'll say, hey, Frank, why you like to do that? Because actually, if you think carefully, to run tests on staging and dev vs running the test on prod may require a different pattern. How would you trigger continuous testing in dev? Whenever you merge a code, submit a PR, or whenever you run the test locally through a command, it's more like manually trigger, right? You don't know when that will happen, just wherever you file that request. So actually, it's pretty handy that since 1.8 version, I think, Airflow already exposed a RESTful API. So given the RESTful API, I'm passing a parameter called configuration with the key environment, and I can specify, okay, I only want to run this test in a staging environment. So you will only run that on staging. On the other hand, I may want to run it periodically in production. It's not only a test framework, it's become a monitoring framework, right? So I can schedule it periodically to ensure the correctness of my production, just repeatedly sending the events and make sure I get the correct results, and maybe every hour if it don't hurt. And also you can add some metrics here to see how fast I can get those requests to measure the freshness of your production. The one thing I didn't mention in the previous big DAG is the last end step, I add a notification DAG there. It's whenever when the test finish, I want somehow to know what was the result of the test. Actually, thanks to the pretty active community of Airflow, already have like email operators, Slack operator building. So whenever something fail, that's like the screenshot of my Slack. It will post the Slack message, say, hey, Frank, to take a look at this. Seems something is not working. Okay, what does it mean? It's like before I develop this task running on Airflow, whenever a test fail, I will be the only guy who knows the test is failed. I will report to the responsible team, explain the failure, and then set up multiple meetings to discuss with them. And maybe I need to convince them that my test case is correct, while they may think my test case is wrong. And then the debugger try to go through some server, access into it, try to find the log, and try to reproduce the bug. But what does it mean if we already have a framework like this? So first, you will post a Slack message to your channel, and then you will know that what's wrong. By clicking on that Slack message URL, what will happen? That's what I will show you in real time in the demo. Okay. Cool. So this is the, make it a little bit larger. Okay, so this is the DAG that we just developed. The first thing I want to mention, even though you only show the DAG here, you have the ability to zoom into the sub-DAG, and you will know the structure of sub-DAG, so that you somehow don't get lost. We'll navigate around DAGs. And it keep all the history here. As you can see, the manual stands for that was manual triggered by me or my CLI from RESTful API. You can assume that is from CI system. And the scheduler is the monitoring system I run every day. I think now I just give you a schedule like every day, so it only runs every day. Okay. We get the freedom to jump back to that time. And when you receive the select node notification, you want to see what's wrong. Airflow is pretty handy because I can go to whatever DAG, and I can view the log of the DAG to see, hey, why this is failing, give you some error information, right? And another cool things about that, let's say, is as an engineer, if this DAG fail, I should get the ability to reproduce the bug. So rerun in Airflow is pretty straightforward. I can clean everything I've run, and you can see the run on the left-hand side. Basically, this is going to rerun. So I was going to pick up whatever is failing and start from there to see whether this is a reproducible bug and to navigate from this. The UI of Airflow is also great. It provides different views. So on this graph view, it gives me an idea of how your DAG looks like, while on the tree view, you can view all the running tests and what's the status of the different one. The one thing I like very much is about the task duration. Let me make it smaller. Since this is a sample task I run, basically you can see the graph and how long does it take for each tag to finish. So if you can write a monitor on this in case on some day the task is passed but running very slow, you may keep an eye on it. And of course, you can directly see all the code from here. Yeah, that's pretty much about it. The reason I want to use Airflow to run my tests is actually by accident, because I'm developing a service where I want to set up the test first to keep running on it, and the time is kind of like tight. But then when I try to spin up the test with whatever framework like Jenkins or Uzi, whatever schedule system that you have, it's not that straightforward. You still need to learn another tech stack that trigger to run that. And that's why, okay, I want to run it pretty fast. I'm already using Airflow. I just let it run. But when I'm developing more and more tests on it, I kind of like found a few features of Airflow, like a visualization, like a rerun, like scheduling system, somehow matches all my requirements for running tests. So that's why now I try to migrate more and more DAG to Airflow. In the production, basically, I rebuild the whole system topology. The system can be more complicated than the counting service I give, and just run daily. And everyone in my team should be able to zoom into the UI and to see which task it failed and start from there. I just find it pretty handy and enable certain of visibility and cross-team communication. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you. Do you have any questions? Supposedly we should use this.
Thanks. Great job, by the way.
Oh, you can just talk and I can repeat the question.
Yeah, can you hear me?
No. Okay, it works. That's why we need a test to check it like every second.
Sounds good. You mentioned about UCI usage, actually. I'm curious, how do you pass and how do you build your new service? Like, I assume UCI works, the pull requests, and then you would trigger a build or something. Yep. And essentially, how do you automate the step?
Yeah, so basically I show how basically I may have the URL here. Yeah, so this is the URL that just see. Basically, you can fire a request to the URL, specify the DAG that you want to run, and maybe this is too small, but you can already trigger a run from this.
Sorry, my question is more about how do you know what service to talk to? So if you have a part of the CI or dev loop, how do you know what service do you need to fire a request against?
Let's say, I'm assuming we're talking about my microservice service-oriented architecture. So basically, if you don't, that's the problem of this that I don't need to think about, because the task is not a specific service, right? So for my repo, when I submit a pull request, I can trigger call the URL from Travis CI, whatever tool that you have, and it will automatically trigger a run from that. So you don't need to worry about it, and when everything finishes, it can then pull back to whatever service you have. Gotcha. That is not specific for the task, but I think there is a way. Since so the current way you use this, let's say, it's not only for one service. It can be like it can be easily extended with multiple service. So actually, maybe that takes too long. So for each of the REPL, you can only start from the middle of the DAG, only trigger the downstream DAG. But whenever you do a release, you can trigger from the top and run all the tests from it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Oh.
Hi, that was great. Thank you. You said you run the same suite of tests in production as well as the other environments.
Yeah.
Does that imply your tests are like committing to the database and making changes? And if not, how do you differentiate between them?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I work on the distributed system. So we ingest all the events. We ingest billions of the events. So the way we do it now is like we trying to send a few like debug events, so we can easily find, because we use HBase, it's pretty hard to find like specific row, so we need to add some tag to that events. So in the production and the dev, we are sending almost the same events with a little bit of tag, let's say pro and dev, so that you can find it from there. So another example will be, let's say the 5 tests you're running in parallel. It would be great, you can keep the test case parallel. You don't have any dependency on it. I think that's the case how we do it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Some folks who've spoken about Airflow say they maintain event logs like in SQL tables for things like state recovery, like in case a task didn't finish or needs to be repeated or something. So I'm just curious, are any of your workflows that you've worked with database driven, and if so, how so?
Yep. So the data warehouse team so actually the Apache Airflow was introducing optimizely for the ETL data pipeline that you described, and currently we're running 40 plus data pipelines on Airflow now. But I think that's I think the question is coming from how would you retry or recover the states. I think it really depends, because in the job you're writing database. So somehow in database you have a partial states there, right? So the way I usually do it now is like I try to avoid develop a monolith workflow that does everything, that does the whole ETL. Basically, I may try to grab the thing that I need to add to the database, store them in S3, and in the following task, grab it and then write. So let's say if the write part failed, there's the first thing you need to do, you need to have another branch, like clean out the database. Because potentially the database in a partial disrupted state that you need to know which data you should clean. So you can clean from there, and when the retry, it should be retry from previous step to read from S3 again and try to write to it. So I think that's like a case-by-case thing. I don't think you can just retry that task, because retry that task may mean writing duplicate data to the database that can be risky as well. Yeah, so it's really a case by case, but you can always go back to the previous step, clean up first, and then run it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you said you use S3 actually, not an actual database, but like a bucket in AWS?
I mean, let's say you're trying to write a few row to whatever database you have. Let's say you try to write a few row to MySQL. You can store the data first in S3. And then the next task will read from S3 and write the data in. So even if you fail, you don't need to retransform data again. You can read from S3 and just rewrite it. Yeah, of course, sometimes I don't know what's the data volume that you write. As we are dealing a lot with like HDFS, we prefer HDFS more over S3, because S3 maybe fail a lot when you handle very large data volume. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.